Welcome back to the Champagne on Ice podcast presented by the Field of 68 as Illinois gets another blowout victory in conference play as they dismantle Indiana so badly that there were audible boos on the Peacock broadcast and Fire Woodson chants very loudly being heard at Assembly Hall. That is about as feel-good of a win as you can have if you're Illinois, especially older Illinois fans who go back to the Bobby Knight days of Illinois-Indiana. As Illinois 25-point victory at Assembly Hall and set some Assembly Hall records in that game. I think it was the most points that a visiting team has scored there in regulation. Boy, this team can light them up when they get going, and we're going to break down that game and also a massive game coming up on Sunday between Illinois and Michigan State that has plenty of Big Ten title implications, and I'm excited to dive into that one. I am Kyle Tausk, joined as always by Mike Farmer. And the winter break is winding down, Mike. We're almost back to school and almost back to State Farm Center for some hoops. I kind of am ready to go back. Are you on the same page as me?
Yeah, I can't wait. Like, breaks are awesome, but just being back at school is so fun. Getting to see basketball games in person again is awesome too. So yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
And it could be a very fun last couple months there of hoops at State Farm Center, especially when you look at the late part of the Illinois home schedule and what could come down. That last week of the season, Illinois goes at Michigan and then home against Purdue, the final two games of the regular season. Talk about two games that could have a lot on the line. But first, this game on Sunday is going to be huge as well. But let's talk about this Illinois-Indiana drubbing as Illinois gets their third conference win already by 25 or more points going into Assembly Hall and beating Indiana, an Indiana team that looked like they just quit halfway through the first half, and that might be the nail in the coffin of the Mike Woodson era with Illinois coming in and doing what they did, but we'll leave that to Indiana people to talk about that side of things. We'll talk about Illinois and Kasperus Yakonas coming back. Does play in that game after being a game-time decision again for the third straight game. Returns after missing two with that forearm injury, and it didn't look like he was ever hurt in the first 4 minutes as he scored 8 of the Illini's first 10 points in the game and was just spectacular again. But Illinois as a team was firing on all cylinders, 60-point first half. Indiana made a little run in the second half, but when you're down 30, it barely even threatened Illinois all that much, and Illinois responded, got it back to 30, and ultimately won it by 25. So I'll let you take this wherever you want to go, but another massive blowout victory for this Illinois team. And with Kasperus back, the Illini once again look very, very close to unbeatable on some nights.
Yeah, it's been just crazy to watch, and it's happened a couple times in the past few weeks. Like, it's unbelievable. The one time without KJ against Penn State, then you go back to Oregon and they destroy a top 10 team on the road. And like, I don't even know where you start with this one. Illinois I want to say it was 10-8. I think Illinois was up early on in the game. You blink and all of a sudden it's 52-22 in Bloomington on the road. Like a crazy Indiana crowd. Tensions are flaring. Like, it's just, I don't know. Illinois couldn't miss a shot, grabbing every offensive rebound they want to. I mean, if we want to talk about, we're not really going to talk about Indiana's situation, but like, there were a couple times we're at like the under 12, under 8 timeout, and there'd been 3 or 4 possessions where Illinois gets an offensive rebound or like finds a wide open guy for a pass, and the Illinois guy is like looking around shocked at how open they are, and then of course they bury a 3 or hit a little mid-range. So I mean, that was just unbelievable, kind of the lack of effort from Indiana. The fans were deservedly pissed off, obviously, but on Illinois' side, just complete dominance, 60 points in the first half. Nobody was missing shots, just destroyed Indiana on the glass. Half of Indiana's points were like contested mid-ranges, just nothing was really working for them. Big T hitting deep threes, Boswell coming in hitting threes. KJ was just dominant in the first half. KJ pretty much had his first half against Indiana was pretty much his second half against Oregon, kind of mirror images of each other, which goes to show like Illinois is going to be at their best when KJ's at his best, as if that wasn't already known. But yeah, it was just like, I was sitting on the couch laughing every time Illinois hit a 3, just extending the lead 18-21 to 24. Now it's 30 or 32. Like, it was unbelievable to watch. And the fact that it's happened a couple times already this year, it's crazy. It just goes to show how much potential this team has when they're clicking.
Yeah, that was the thing coming in that having watched Indiana really throughout the Woodson era, but especially this year, they have the tendency to just fold over and die pretty quickly. That's why they get blown out so much. So there was plenty of moments, especially late in the first half, where, goodness gracious, I don't know what's going on there with Indiana, but there were some guys just standing there basically quitting on plays, especially their big man, Umar Ballo, didn't look like he had a whole lot of interest in running very much, showing some effort. But I do think Illinois deserves some credit, at least at the start, for causing that to happen, just because they had such an avalanche early where it was clear from the get-go Illinois was on fire offensively, and KJ came and scored so quickly, and Big T was hitting shots, and Illinois went on such a big run early in the game that it just felt like it was another situation where Indiana, well, we're down 20, that's it, we're done playing tonight. They did, I guess, came out, and Woodson maybe actually got them going in the second half, but Illinois responded to that pretty quickly. But the thing that continues to amaze me with Illinois is just how quickly they can blow a game open, and just some of these scoring avalanches that they can go on, where it really takes like 1 5-minute stretch in a game and Illinois can put it away in some of these. They've done it 3 times now in conference. Early in the second half against Oregon, I believe they went on a 20-4 run, and the game was over at that point. Oregon wasn't going to recover. The first half against Penn State was as good as it gets, 34-4 run, and that game was over instantly as soon as you beat them that badly in the first half. And then in this game, Illinois, I believe, went on a 26-8 run in the first half. And especially with that Indiana team and the state of that program, that game is over as soon as that run is over. It's incredible what Illinois can do and how quickly they can jump on you. And it's different than some of these past teams. For as good as last year's team was offensively, they couldn't guard anybody well enough to go on these massive runs, because, they could go score on 10 of 12 possessions, but their opponent was probably scoring on 8 of 12, and it was just back and forth, and there were a couple games in conference play where they were just trading buckets for an entire half, but Illinois couldn't pull away. Now this team can pull away pretty quickly because they can guard, and they can, when they're hitting shots, it feels like they come in bunches, and they can just roll on top of a team and get them to quit, and that's a pretty good feature to have as a basketball team, is the ability to just stomp on a team that badly like Illinois can.
Yeah, and the thing with the runs I've noticed too is, for as much as we've talked about Illinois' three-point shooting and they need to get really hot from three to win some games, like these runs that we've been talking about, it's maybe you hit 2 threes, but then all of a sudden it's a fast break layup, somebody gets a dunk on transition off a steal, next possession it's an offensive rebound and ends up in a 3, and then it's Trey White getting a layup. Like, it comes from so many different areas. It comes from every player on the roster pretty much. You got Jake Davis coming in off the bench as a 6th man, then Dre's hitting a 3. Like, we talked a lot about how this team was deep in our first episode of the season, and we've seen it this year. Like, we did not expect Jake Davis to be a contributor. He's coming in, getting offensive rebounds, flying in, boxing out Umar Ballo. And it's just like, that's kind of the culture Illinois has developed over the past 5 years with Brad Underwood. It's everyday guys. If this guy's not having his night, we're going to have this guy come off the bench. He's going to do his job just as good as the previous guy could. And that's how Illinois is winning these games. That's how they're going on these massive 20-6 runs and just kind of shutting opponents out, and they're closing down for the night. Like, it can be on the road, it can be at home, it could be against a garbage team like Chicago State or Maryland Eastern Shore, or it could be against a top 10 team at the time in Oregon. Like, if Illinois gets just 1 or 2 of these runs in March, in the Big Ten tournament, in March Madness itself, look out. Like, this team can beat anybody, I feel like, on any given night. It's going to take a full team effort, but you get one of these runs, and I think the whole nation's going to see how good this team is and how much potential they have. And I think a lot of people saw that against Indiana a couple nights ago. A lot of people did focus on Indiana's side, of course. Mike Woodson just not showing up, the team not looking too interested, all the fight and all the stuff after the game. But you got to acknowledge Illinois at some point. Like, this is a team that's incredibly scary, and as I said, it comes from so many different areas. KJ's out one night, doesn't matter. They're going on a 34-4 run. KJ's back. He's going to lead you, put up 20 and 4 and 4 in the first half. So it's just, I don't know. Like we said, not to hop off the bandwagon after that loss against USC. That wasn't really going to change the outcome of this team's season. And you saw that in the next game, Indiana just demolished by Illinois.
Well, that's another thing that's really impressive, too. I was looking up the exact numbers on this, going back in the schedules, but Illinois has not lost back-to-back games in 55 games now under Brad Underwood. It was the 2022-23 end-of-season collapse. That was the last time Illinois lost back-to-back games. And I don't even necessarily count like regular season into Big Ten tournament and NCAA tournament since there's so much, break in between there and you're seeing different opponents. So the last time they lost back-to-back regular season games within like a 1 week span, February 14th and February 18th of that 2022-23 season. And since then, I mean, and there's been losses and there's been double-digit losses, and not one time has Illinois responded in the next game with another loss and started a losing streak, which is just pretty remarkable, especially in the Big Ten. I know it's not been the strongest conference ever where maybe you're playing top 10 opponents back-to-back, but the way Brad Underwood has gotten his teams to respond after losses has been pretty impressive, and it's just you have so much trust now that those anomaly games Saturday against USC, there's no excuse for how flat they looked at home against a okay USC team. They are starting to play a little better. They've entered quad 2 territory now, so it's not a quad 3 loss as we sit here, but doesn't excuse the fact that Illinois just didn't play well and was flat and got out rebounded by a bad rebounding team. But when that happens, it's going to be pretty rare, and that Brad Underwood is going to get it fixed very quickly. I mean, you could see in the first 10 minutes of the Indiana game, the effort and the energy Illinois came out with, and the offensive glass, they were dominating early. I mean, they were doubling Indiana up from the under 16 timeout on the offensive glass, and it's just, that's a pretty comforting feeling knowing that even if you do have a letdown performance and even if you don't play well one night, which you never want to see happen, especially at home, I'd love to get the early January home losses corrected in years future, but Illinois has never let it spiral here recently with their better teams because, that 22-23 team had its own problems anyway. I wouldn't have trusted that team in any spot really based on what some of the vibes were in that group. But the last two teams have been just phenomenal at responding after losses. And just to wrap up like the runs point, Illinois hasn't done it against Minnesota and Washington. It's like, well, they did do it against Washington, but it's been, at Indiana is a tough place to go on a 26-8 run. At Oregon, I mean, that's an Oregon team that's lost twice all season, and you just dominate them. Penn State at home without Kasperus, 34-4 run. Penn State hasn't played great in conference, but they've challenged some teams. They challenged Michigan State on Wednesday night. Like, that's not a team that just rolls over and gives up 34-4 runs to anybody. Like, Illinois is doing it against quality competition. And it doesn't feel like it's just, Illinois is so talented and they've got, an NBA point guard that, when they play a team they're way better than, they can just overwhelm them. They're doing it against teams that, aren't all that far off from their level, which is just pretty crazy to see and pretty exciting because I do think that they can do it against better teams too. And all it takes is one big run like that. And that might be all you need against a better team. If you can just go on that 12-0 run, that might be all you need in a game between two close teams. So I'm monitoring that for sure because it feels like almost every week Illinois is on a massive run, and they've got so much blowout potential too that really shows their ceiling, and they're starting to show their upper level of play more consistently to where it's not once a month they are out of their minds and if this team plays like this every night they're going to the Final Four. They're playing like it every other night almost, and that's a lot more consistency than I would have thought with this team. So that's pretty exciting. The fact that you've blown out 3 conference teams already in just are they 5-2 in the league right now? 7 conference games.
Yeah, 5-2.
3 out of 7 you've blown teams out, and you should have blown out Washington if DJ Davis didn't go nuclear in the second half and make that a game, and Illinois fell apart a little bit. So that's a very good sign, and just great to see Illinois back at full strength show exactly what they had showed in the past couple weeks, and they did not let that USC loss derail them whatsoever.
Yeah, I got 2. We've kind of hit on them both, but 2 more quick points on the runs. Like, Illinois has gone on a bunch of runs. We've talked about this, but they're also not giving up a ton of runs. Like, when they're on the 10-0 run, it's extending to a 20-4 run. Like, their defense is kind of locking in and saying, we need this run right now. We're not going to give up any points. We're going to rebound as hard as we can and just extend this run. But then Illinois has had a couple cold stretches offensively in certain games. The second half of Indiana, they kind of went cold at some points. But like, the defense and the rebounding are what's keeping them in games when they're down and keeping them up by 30 when they're up 30. Like, and that is so huge in March because there's other teams like Illinois that can go on runs and kind of derail a team's night within 5-6 minutes. So Illinois being able to rebound and just keep playing defense as hard as they can, it's huge. And then my second point was just like in this Indiana game, the 3-point shooting numbers didn't even end up great. You win by 30. You blow out Penn State with a kind of a mediocre shooting night. There's been like the Arkansas game was a great shooting night. Oregon was a great shooting night. But like some of these wins are happening without even like Illinois shooting 45% from three. I think Illinois was right around 33% in this Indiana game. And that's a whole nother level of scariness because we've seen Illinois when they're shooting 45%, they're going on the road beating a top 10 Oregon team by 30, 32, and the biggest win against an AP top 10 team ever. So it's just like there's a lot of ways this team can beat you. There are ways this team can lose, as we saw, getting out rebounded against USC, kind of falling apart late against Northwestern and Tennessee. But like the upside, it's just been there since the opening night of the season, and it's continued up until mid-January, which has been great to see.
Individual-wise in this game, I thought it was a huge performance for Tomislav Ivisic in that we had questioned. And by the way, I can't figure out. I think I've said I've said Ivisic all season, and every time a broadcast says it, it's Ivisic.
All the broadcasts say it differently.
I'm like changing it now. I don't know. I'll probably say it 4 different times this episode, but we'll go with Ivisic, a big T. He had a great game, and that was huge to see, considering the matchup with Ballo. I know Ballo ended up with a nice stat line, but man, Ivisic just outworked him from the opening jump. The offensive glass was huge for him early. He was really active. And then when he's hitting shots, I mean, it's so huge for this team. You could just see how much things open up offensively, especially in a matchup like that. And Illinois is going to see so many more matchups like that against bigs who just struggle to come out and guard on the perimeter. And that's just such a matchup advantage. And Illinois got to their pick and pop game with him a few times in the first half, hit a couple shots, was feeling it so much that he hit one from about 40 feet. I mean, if he's got that range as a 7-1 center, that's pretty exciting. But he was really good in this game and ends up finishing with 17 points, 11 rebounds in a matchup against one of the best bigs in the conference and just took it to him. And his activity on the glass was fantastic and still needs to clean up a few things in terms of just finishing around the rim. There was a couple bunnies he missed still. I'd love to see him start to get going on that front. But when he's hitting his shots and when he's involved in the offense, you can just see how lethal Illinois is. And I think having Kasperus back to run some of that pick and pop stuff with and find him a little bit more was important for him as well. You can see how well those two play together.
Yeah, the pick and roll and like the pick and pop are just deadly if Big T hits one shot somewhat early on in the game, especially from three, I mean, Illinois is going to have a pretty good offensive night in my opinion. And you saw that a lot. Like Ballo was kind of confused on the pop. He can't really get out and guard Big T. Big T's 7-1. Nobody's blocking that 3-point shot. Like a lot of the contests aren't going to mean a whole lot when he's a 7'1", 7'2", massive guy shooting threes from 30 feet. And I think he had 3 or 4 of those in the Indiana game, mostly in the first half. And that's like a huge part of the reason Illinois scored 60 in that half. It just opens up the paint so much so that Boswell can get to the hoop, Trey White can get to the hoop. When Merez is in there, he can body whoever is guarding him. And yeah, when you're doing the pick and roll with KJ and Big T's shooting threat, like the big has to go out and guard him. And then KJ, if he's left one-on-one against Anthony Leal or Trey Galloway, like, no offense, but it's game over. Like, good night, man. It's just not every team's going to have, or some teams are going to have much better matchups for KJ. Indiana was not one of those teams, and Illinois just completely exploited that from the opening tip, pretty much.
And we got to see a different side of Big T, too, late in the game where he was getting in Luke Goode's face. I loved seeing that. I love seeing a guy that's got a little fire inside of him, especially your starting big man when he's not going to take anything. A guy boxes him out hard late in a 30-point game, and he's going to go up to him. He's not going to take that. Like, let's go, man. That was awesome to see. I freaking loved seeing Big T get going like that.
That was a scary little Eastern European. We've seen that with Jokic in the NBA a couple times. Like, yeah, they are not letting anything happen to them. Good to see the team step up. And I want to hit on Luke Goode for a little bit just because he was a huge part of the team for the past 3 years. I have no ill will towards Goode. I loved him as a player. He hit big shots all the time. But yeah, that was kind of a cheap shot. That really aggressive back out with an elbow to the back. And then I felt bad because Indiana just completely left him out to dry. Made him do the post game press conference. He's getting heat about the fan. He's talking about the fans, like, oh my God, man. And then he's quote tweeting Dan Dockic's dumbass after the game. Like, it's just, I feel bad for him. He went back to his hometown school. Saw a really good roster. Saw Mike Woodson, and yeah, I feel bad. He's starting alongside Trey Galloway now instead of playing at Illinois. But whatever.
Yeah, I know there was kind of a big faction of the Illini fan base that was kind of turning on him after this game, and I agree. He had the one flagrant one where he kind of had a high elbow. I forget who he was boxing out, and then I think the one was a little aggressive late on Big T. I totally was behind Big T, just saying, hey, we don't need that right now. I'm gonna show some fire here. Let's go. Why are we doing this down 30? You had 38 minutes to show some fight. But I will say, like, he was the only guy in that Indiana team that was playing hard all night, and I have some respect for that, at least, watching some of those other Indiana guys just mope around and not move, and at least he's boxing out hard. That was something that when he's on your team, if the roles were reversed and he was still in Illini doing that, I think every Illinois fan would be behind him. I understand that. I think maybe you could see a few of those plays as over the top. I don't think he was doing anything dirty, really. And I still really like Luke. He was huge. How quickly people forget he hit 2 massive second half threes in that Iowa State Sweet 16 game to send Illinois to the Elite Eight. How quickly people forget that when some of the things that have been said. So I get it. I thought he was a little over the top too, but I think you can kind of chalk that up to, hey, he's playing his old team, and his current situation is not very fun, so he's going to take that opportunity to play a little extra hard that night and show some intensity, and is what it is. I still will always really like Luke, and I agree with you. I feel really bad for him. I think his intentions were fine. It's not one of those situations, unlike a few other Illini transfers of years past, where I have zero respect for the decision-making process of it. For him, I did. He graduated from Illinois in 3 years and grew up a huge Indiana fan. His family's from Indiana. Go play for Indiana for your last year if they offer you. Like, it is what it is. I thought it was fine. And they were supposed to have a good team, and it's a train wreck. And I feel bad for him. He's certainly not the reason that they have no effort to him, because he seems like the one guy that consistently brings it. So, but yeah, that was interesting that he was pretty much involved with a little scuffle there at the end. And I think there were 5 total technical fouls given out in that game, and every single one of them started with him. Trey White got him back with a little cheap shot early in the second half, and he had one early, and then there's 4 technicals given. I like it, though. I'm one that enjoys a little extracurricular stuff in some basketball games every once in a while. It's boring to just go through a season and just shake hands all the time. Like, give me a little bit of drama occasionally. I love it.
Yeah, 2 classic Big Ten teams. I know they don't consider us a rival for some reason. Who cares about that? We're going to beat you by 30, so it doesn't really matter. But yeah, college basketball with all the realignment and stuff, it's great to see kind of old rivalries come back, some chippiness. Coaches talking about other coaches post game. I watched the old ESPN 30 for 30 on the creation of the Big East, Georgetown and Syracuse and all those great teams. Like, that's kind of what it felt like last night or a couple nights ago, which is fun to see.
Yeah. Finishing up on this game, obviously, I mean, we mentioned it a little bit, but just a totally different basketball team with Kasperus out there. I mean, he was spectacular in the first half, had 19 points. Getting every spot. He's just so under control. Such a great leader of your offense. I mean, you just put the ball in his hands and something good's going to happen. And I don't know what Indiana talked about in film session leading up to the game, but they go under a screen on the first play of the game. Kasperus is like waiting there, like, wait a minute, I'm this open for 3? And he hits a 3 of his first shot back to shake off some rust. I mean, it was a practice jump shot. Then he comes down, makes a really nice physical move to the rim, and then a couple possessions later, Indiana can't get matched up, and Umar Ballo backs up 8 feet on him, and he walks into another wide open 3, and he's got 8 points early. Illinois is going like, all right, Hoosiers, that's Mike Woodson for you, I guess. I don't know what was going on there, but you let him get going on the first couple possessions, and it's his game, and he's just incredible. Mock draft came out. I forget. I need to start keeping track so I can actually properly credit who the mock drafts are. I just keep seeing Illini people retweet mock drafts. One of them had him number 2 behind Cooper Flagg a few days ago. So, yeah, his stock just keeps rising, and he is a star player, Big Ten Player of the Year candidate, and you see the importance of him night and day from that USC game with him running the show on offense.
Yeah, I mean, I've seen the big boards and the mock drafts too, and it's kind of I'm like half the ones I'm seeing, it's kind of Cooper Flagg and a tier of his own, and then KJ and Dylan Harper, and then like it's Trey Johnson, Maluach, some of those guys. So Illinois is going to have a top 5 pick in the 2025 NBA draft, which is insane to say. And the crazier, I saw somebody tweet this recently. They had Jeremiah Fears, who was like top 10 in a mock draft recently. He decommits, and you follow that up getting KJ, who's top 5. Like it's just it's crazy recruiting. It's great to see. But yeah, KJ pretty much recorded all of his stats in the first half. I think 21, 3, and 4 or something. It's the same thing every night when he's out there. Illinois is dominant. He looks dominant. You can totally see why he's a top 5 potential pick. It's not really based off potential. He's showing everything he has in college every single night. So it's just when he's out there, Illinois is at a different level. When he's on the bench or when he's injured, Illinois at times can kind of slow down when Boswell's the lead guard. I think Boswell's still a fantastic piece, but kind of rusty being the lead guard. So there's some rust showing. Illinois is not really getting into much action when he's the lead guard. But then KJ comes back off the bench. Everything's great once again. Like Illinois gets 3 buckets in a row or something. So, I mean, he's going to be such a key piece for the next 2 months. He should be a first-team All-Big Ten player. I think he will be, unless the media is stupid for some reason. But yeah, it's just, I don't know. He's the piece that can lead Illinois to a second weekend appearance in March. And I think there's definitely a possibility that happens.
Yeah, you know, the funny thing, you mentioned Jeremiah Fears. If you go back to this past offseason, Fears made the decision that he was going to reclassify to this year's class in April, decommitted from Illinois. From my understanding, Illinois wanted him for next year's class and just was all right letting him go. I didn't necessarily think that they were going to promise him a starting role. It wasn't a guy that they thought a year early should be a featured guard on a high major team. Of course, it's worked out for him, and Oklahoma took him, and he's been great. So Illinois was wrong on that part of it a little bit, but you lose Jeremiah Fears, who's a lottery type of pick currently on mock boards. And then Illinois was going after hard Yegor Demin, who was another overseas prospect who was playing over in Spain. And they didn't get him. He goes to BYU. He was another NBA guard that Illinois lost out on. He's projected to go in the late lottery of the draft. And then Illinois pivots a third time, and they've got the best one of the 3 by far in Kasperus Yakonas. So they just, Illinois misses on a guy, and they're going to find somebody. It's just pretty crazy how that went, where Illinois was going after 2 different guys and in different, contexts, obviously. And then they end up with a third guard, and he's by far the best NBA prospect and the best college player of the 3, and one of the more talented players I've seen play for Illinois. It's just pretty remarkable what they did there this past offseason. The last guy I did want to mention was Boswell, who you talked about there. I thought he had a good game in this one. Still can't really explain some of the finishes he misses at the rim. He's just been bad at the rim. His season, just in terms of efficiency, scoring the ball, has been a little odd. It's just he's not this bad from 3, and he's not this bad around the rim. He's just struggling to finish some things. But I thought he had a really good game. Season high in points, 22, game high. And Kasperus was in some foul trouble early in the second half. And you saw Kylan for an extended stretch of the game while Indiana was kind of trying to threaten Illinois a little bit and was in the midst of a run that kind of cut it under 20. Boswell took control and played with good pace and just got Illinois back on track, got to the free throw line a couple times with some really strong drives, exploiting mismatches on the perimeter. And was rebounding and pushing, and I thought that was huge for Illinois to kind of stem that Indiana tide. And I do think, even though he was doing it by himself out there as really the primary ball handler while Kasperus was in some foul trouble, I thought KJ coming back really did help him, because I just think you see a more comfortable version of him when he doesn't have the burden of being Illinois' only ball handler. And you can kind of play off those two guys together, with KJ obviously taking on the primary responsibility of initiating offense for Illinois. Kylan can play off the ball a little bit. And then I think when you do see some KJ on the bench and Kylan taking over that role, it just feels like he plays a little freer and looser in those situations because he hasn't had to deal with 40 minutes of that burden on him. And I thought you saw that in this game. He was just a lot more comfortable when KJ did leave the floor to kind of take over. I thought he was really aggressive. I just love still for him, even though he struggled to finish, his ability to get to the rim, his physicality as a driver, the fact that he's gotten fouled as much as he has. First 2 years at Arizona, I believe he combined for 39 free throw attempts his first 2 seasons at Arizona, and I think he's over 100 now for Illinois this year. So he's just completely transformed his offensive game. If he's not over 100, he's close to 100. And I just think that's a really positive development, and he started to shoot free throws way better than he did early in the year when he was struggling a little bit. And even though he struggled from the floor and his percentages don't look good, I still think he's been just such an awesome addition for Illinois, and he was huge in this game.
Yeah, I keep going back to Brad Underwood quotes from like media day and his press conferences. And he was saying from the get-go, like Boswell's a guy, obviously they saw him in high school being from Champaign, tried to go after him. But then like this past offseason when they grabbed him from Arizona, they said Boswell's a guy that like we see all conference level defensive potential. We've seen that this season. They said like he's way faster than he's shown at Arizona. He lost some weight, but gained some strength too, as you've seen with the drives, being super physical, getting to the line, like you said. So you've seen like that kind of combine into one. The shooting hasn't really been there, which is weird, as you talked about. But like he's been a way better player than he was at Arizona. And a huge part of that is having a top 5 pick next to him, taking the pressure off him, commanding the offense, breaking double teams, all that stuff. But yeah, like Boswell himself has been so good, and that's without, as you said, great efficiency, just really not good shooting numbers. I think the 3-point percentage is up to like 28, 27 or 28. It was down at like 19 earlier. So he's getting slightly better. You can see him with a little bit more confidence taking those shots from the top of the key. Weren't falling against USC. He had a couple against Indiana. So it's just, I think with time, those numbers will continue to improve. I think he'll still get more comfortable at times when KJ's not in the game. Like it wasn't great against Indiana, but it's a 1-game sample size kind of, or with the last 2 games as well. But I think he'll continue to adapt to his role and just overcome some of the struggles he's seen offensively. But at the same time, defensively, he's going to be there every single night, locking down the other team's best guard. Pretty good rebounder too. He can just kind of do it all, even though some of that hasn't been there yet this season. But I think in due time it will be.
I want to get this right because I was a little bit off on this, but it was 39 free throw attempts for him last year at Arizona in 36 games, 58 total free throws in his 2-year career at Arizona in 71 games. This year, he shot 81 free throw attempts in 17 games. I mean, that is the biggest point of growth that he's had, where he's always been so strong. Hasn't been the most explosive guy, but I think he's gotten a little quicker off the bounce, and that's something that Brad Underwood talked about on Media Day, where he said, he's more explosive than I thought. It wasn't necessarily a part of his game when he was being recruited in high school and at Arizona, but he did work with Fletch hard, and I lost 15 to 20 pounds, I think, and just leaned up this offseason. You're seeing that as a driver and his ability to get to the free throw line, even if his finishing isn't all that there yet. It's been a huge development, and that's been a big point of offense for Illinois when they've struggled to get offense. They were in a pretty sizable drought there midway through the second half against Indiana for as good as they were in the first half, and Kylan kind of steadied that ship by getting to the free throw line. So that, to me, has been the biggest development for him. And I think, especially when you talk about like next year when he gets even more comfortable, I think you can pair a lot of the other things you've seen with much better efficiency, because I think he'll just continue to grow in that area. Hopefully it happens the latter part of this season as well. Let's move on now to this Michigan State game on Sunday, 11 a.m. tip on CBS. And this is just a massive game for both teams, really, but this is a huge one. Michigan State currently ranked 12th in the AP poll, 15-2. They've won 10 in a row. Now, I will add the caveat that I'm not sure you find a ton of impressive opponents that they've beaten in that 10-game winning streak, but the bottom line is Michigan State is much improved from these last few Tom Izzo teams that have just kind of been meh, haven't been all that scared of them. They made the tournament. They've kept that long Izzo tournament streak alive just by the skin of their teeth the last couple of years. But this team is a no-doubt tournament team, probably a top 4 seed in the tournament. Not sure if they're the 12th best team in the country. We'll probably find that out if they handle Illinois on Sunday. I think you could probably say that more confidently. But this is a good basketball team. This is a really tough place to play. The Breslin Center in East Lansing. It's going to be the toughest road game Illinois played by far. Oregon's environment was nothing. Northwestern, yeah, they pack it out when Illinois comes to town. You still got like 40 to 50% Illinois fans there. Indiana is a tough environment when they're good, but when they're starting to boo 10 minutes into the game, it just doesn't have that same level of intensity there. This place is going to be rocking on Sunday. This is a huge game for Michigan State. And for Illinois, to me, it's pretty close to a must-win if you want to win the Big Ten. And that's not what this season is going to be winning the Big Ten obviously is a goal, and I think this Illinois team is up there with any team in this conference in terms of talent and pure ability. But winning the Big Ten, this game is one you probably have to get because you'd fall 3 games behind in the loss column. If you don't get it, you'd have some serious work to do and very little room for error to make that up. Obviously, it's not the end of the world if that's not the case, and losing this game won't hurt your resume whatsoever. But in that sense, it's pretty close to a must-win for me if Illinois wants to have that opportunity late in the year, that final week, to be right in the thick of the Big Ten title mix. But also, it'd be Illinois' best resume win of the year pretty clearly. Michigan State, top 17 net team, 17th in the net currently, true road game. It'd be a huge one to get. So what stands out to you about this Michigan State team, and what you'll be looking for in this game on Sunday?
I'll get to what I'm looking for. I have one point I want to make, but I'll make that
Sure.
later about just kind of what I'm looking for. But with Michigan State, kind of similar to Oregon in some sense, mostly offensively in terms of their scoring. It's not like they don't have a guy like Terrence Shannon who's going to drop 23. They do it by committee. They have Jaden Akins, who is probably their best player, but like it's kind of similar to Oregon. Like they have a 10-man rotation. They play legitimately 10 deep, excuse me. A couple bigs that they work by committee, like none of them really scare you individually, but as a whole, like they're good rebounders. They'll score in the low post several times in the game. Not a great shooting team. Like Akins has really struggled from 3. Fears doesn't shoot a whole lot of threes. Holloman doesn't shoot like crazy. But like it's a group of talented guards, talented wings, talented bigs with a good coach, a good defensive team, and they're going to be playing at home at the Breslin Center in front of a packed crowd. So like all those things combined, it's obvious why they're a good team and why they're probably going to be a top 4 seed in the tournament and might win the Big Ten. So like everything's kind of by committee. The one thing I've really noticed, as you mentioned, 10-game win streak, but not a ton of super talented opponents that you're really scared of. But still, prior to the Penn State game, which they just won by 5, they won 90-85 a couple days ago. They had held their last 7 opponents to under 70 points, which is huge. I mean, in the Big Ten, I think that's 5 Big Ten opponents and FAU, some other teams. I mean, that's huge. And this is one of the most efficient and explosive offensive seasons in college basketball history. And to do that 7 games in a row, holding teams under 70, some teams under 60, like that's unbelievable. Just goes to show Tom Izzo still kind of has it. He can still get the best out of a group of guys. So that's kind of what I'm looking for. Is Illinois going to be able to, I guess, just like get above? Obviously, Penn State just got to 85 at Breslin, so that's kind of a little warning sign for Michigan State against a good opponent. But still, like they could flip the switch and just dominate a team defensively as they have a couple times this year. And I want to see Illinois just not have that happen. I want to see a fast start. And my point, which I'll get to later, is I want to see Illinois play a complete 40 minutes, and I'll get to why that is later. But yeah, it's a really solid fundamental team. Good defensively, not a great shooting team offensively. They just don't take a lot of threes. A lot of their stuff is coming from in the paint. Guys, really great drivers and athletes, explosive guys that get to the rim, and a couple decent bigs. So it's a scary team. It's just a very solid team overall, and it's going to be a great game. I feel like.
Yeah, they're really balanced. They don't really have a star player. I think Akins is good. I don't think he's going to make like a all Big Ten first or second team, though. It's just a team that, like you said, I mean, you look at KenPom here, they've got 5 guys between 20 and 22.5% usage rate, which is just unheard of to have 5 guys right all in that same mix, and it's just not one guy that you'll go to. And Izzo's going to spread the minutes out too. Nobody's playing a ton of minutes on this team. I think their leading minutes guy is Akins at 26.5, and he'll go 10 deep, like legitimately 10 deep. If I'm counting this correctly, there's 10 guys that play at least 14 minutes a game on this team. So it's depth, it's different lineup combinations, it's a group that just feels like it fits what a Tom Izzo Michigan State team should look like a lot better than a few of these past teams have. And they've improved the front court more than, it's still not a front court that I think is at the top of the conference, but it's been a lot more serviceable, especially defensively, than the ones in the past have been, with guys improving. And they brought in this Zimone Sapala. I don't know if I'm saying that name right, but he's actually analytically has stood up really well defensively and on the glass. So it's an interesting. I'm going to learn a lot about Michigan State. Obviously, I'll be watching the Illinois angle of this game, but just as a Big Ten and college basketball fan, this game will tell me quite a bit about this Michigan State team, because there's no doubt they're a very good team. But in terms of how legit is this team, if they can handle Illinois at home, I think that's the thing they need to do to really get people to buy into, like, okay, Izzo's got a team now that can do some real damage. I'm not quite sure I'm totally there yet, just as a Big Ten observer, based on what their schedule has been so far. But this will tell me a lot. I do think Illinois, can match up pretty well with this team. I think the one thing I would point out that I like on the Illinois side of things is Michigan State is very small in the backcourt, and they'll play a lot of 3-guard lineups, which I think is something Illinois can take advantage of with the amount of positional size that Illinois has, and especially Kasperus, and getting him working. We saw him in the Indiana game when Miles Rice was on him. He would get into some backdowns a little bit and work out of that, and he's just so physical. I think that could play to Illinois' advantage, because you play Jeremy Fears, who's 6'2", Trey Holloman starts, he's 6'2", Jaden Akins, 6'4", Cohen Carr's only 6'5". I mean, they play Jace Richardson, who they bring off the bench, I think might be their best player. He's their best NBA prospect, only 6'3". So there's a lot of smaller guards to where I think Illinois will have a size advantage in the backcourt and on the wing. Michigan State also plays 2 pretty big front court guys at all times too, though, so that gets interesting. I think that leads to part of why it's not a team that's going to take a lot of threes or shoot it all that well from 3, is their spacing actually isn't all that good. A lot of times they'll have 2 non-shooters on the floor together, and they'll play one guy, Cohen Carr will sit in the dunker spot, and then they'll have a big on the low block, or they'll put 2 bigs in the game, put them both on each block, and they'll run some stuff, with those guys in action together coming up and setting screen. So it's a very interesting offense. It doesn't always have a ton of spacing and shooting to it, but they're efficient, and yeah, they're good around the rim. Their guards are really good at getting paint touches. Their bigs are really good on the offensive glass. That's a huge key for me in this game. Win the rebounding battle. I think you have a good chance to go in there and win. Illinois has been fantastic rebounding team this year, but Michigan State's right up there with them. These are the 2 best rebounding teams in the Big Ten going at it, and that's going to be a huge factor in this game, especially with that Michigan State front court, who has been awesome on the glass. Big test for Ivisic and Morez Johnson in that department. Also, Illinois' guards coming in. I think the single biggest key for me, though, in this game is Illinois has to try and keep Michigan State out of transition, because this is a vintage Izzo team in terms of transition offense. And that's, really the reason they've been so efficient offensively, despite being one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the country, is because they're so lethal in transition. And their guards are so good at pushing the ball up the floor. And they've got 2 guys who are just athletic freaks, lethal in transition, in Akins and Cohen Carr, who can throw down a dunk on anybody if you give them a step and you lose them in transition. And Michigan State, like you mentioned, has been really good defensively this year, and it's not necessarily one where they're going to force a ton of turnovers, but they're just going to force you into bad shots, long misses, and they're going to push and they're going to torch you if they get playing fast. And that's where Illinois needs to be really good in this game if they want to win. His transition defense is going to be huge. I wonder how Brad Underwood approaches it, since Illinois is so aggressive on the offensive glass. You usually send 4 guys to the offensive glass. For Illinois this year, do you maybe lighten up and sacrifice that a little bit just to make sure you can match up and slow Michigan State down in transition a little bit off of some misses, especially if Illinois is struggling to generate shots? I'll wonder how that is, especially knowing Michigan State's front court is so good defensive rebounding. Do you maybe, throw your hands up on the offensive glass a little bit to make sure that you can keep those guys, especially when Carr is in the game and that guy's just an alley-oop machine. I mean, you cannot lose him. He'll see a miss, he'll run down the floor and throw a dunk down on you. Illinois got to have an answer for that. So that's really the one thing I'm looking for, because that's where Michigan State, as a lot of these past Izzo teams that have been really good have, they're just, you let them get running, balls in a guard's hands, and they're pushing it up the floor, and they're just so good in that sense. So one of the best transition offenses in the country. That's a huge key for Illinois.
Yeah, that's going to be super interesting to watch because, you send 4 guys like Brad Underwood does, and like you were talking about, don't grab the rebound, then all of a sudden Jeremy Fears outlet pass to Akins or Carr, and it's game over. Unless Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn's back there pinning some guy off the glass for the 3rd time in 5 games.
That'll be fun. I want to jump off. I want Cohen Carr to go up for a dunk and Dre Gibbs-Lawhorn to come flying in to try and block it. That'd be cinema. That's awesome.
That would be. Yeah. Yeah, but I feel like I've seen 15 highlights of a Fears outlet pass to Carr, and it's just a windmill dunk or from 10 feet or something. It's so many crazy athletes, and Fears has been a phenomenal distributor so far this year. But yeah, if you overcommit on the offensive glass, which Illinois does, but usually it does work out because other teams aren't as good as rebounding teams as MSU. But if they do overcommit, I don't know, you're not in a good position, especially at home. That really just electrifies the crowd, forces an Illinois timeout or something. But it's going to be interesting because Illinois is so good, and such a big part of their offense is that offensive rebounding, getting second chances, kicking it out to shooters, or Merez finishing a dunk after an offensive board. But yeah, that's going to be huge. My one point I wanted to make isn't even really game plan related. It's kind of just the history of these two teams recently. The past 4 or 5 years since Illinois has been really good, they've had some just great matchups against Michigan State in Champaign, in East Lansing, wherever it is. These games are going down to the wire every single time, whether it's back and forth the whole game or Illinois is up by 15, all of a sudden Michigan State storms back. Could be the other way around. These teams have just gone back and forth, just great games every single time they meet. And I think Illinois is a young team versus Michigan State's got a handful of veterans and obviously just a veteran Hall of Fame coach in Tom Izzo. So that's incredibly interesting to me, whether or not Illinois can play 40 minutes. I'm pretty confident this game is going to be back and forth. I think the winner is going to win by 1 or 2 points, whoever it is. But I think Illinois could be in trouble if they have a great 32. We saw this last year at Michigan State. Michigan State. Illinois led for a while, then all of a sudden can't buy a bucket. Everything kind of collapses. AJ Hogarth's getting layups in transition, and all of a sudden Illinois loses. On the flip side, I don't know, Illinois has come back and won a couple games. They've hit big shots. Trent Frazier hits that dagger a couple years ago. Illinois has closed out a couple close games against Michigan State at home in recent years. So that's really my key to the game. Just as a young team, you always have KJ in your back pocket, assuming he's healthy and on the court late in games. He's going to hit a huge shot here and there. But everybody else, you can't have Big T get in foul trouble and kind of go quiet in the second half, as we've seen a couple times. Boswell's got to continue to be the veteran leader that he's been in the first 15, 16 games of the year. Trey White's got to step up. He's kind of fallen off the past couple games. Not something I'm worried about, but get him back to form, especially late in the game. I could go down the whole roster, but just everybody complete 40 minutes. Don't have a great 38 minutes, and then all of a sudden don't block out Cohen Carr. He gets a dunk. Hit your free throws as you've done the entire year. Illinois has been a sneaky good free throw shooting team this year. They actually hadn't had a top 100 team in the country in terms of free throw percentage under Brad Underwood, and now I think they're 77%. They're 30th in the country, and they get to the line a ton. So it's just little things that they've done the whole year, you got to continue to do this entire game. It's not just late game, it's the entire game. One mistake leads to a dunk in the Michigan State crowd going crazy. Underwood has to call a timeout. Stuff like that can ruin a game against a top 15 team that's a really good roster. So it's just the simple stuff. You got to do it for the entire 40 minutes.
It's an interesting point, too, about the close games, because I feel really good about Illinois coming down the stretch of a tight game based on what we've seen KJ do. I mean, we've seen him hit a game-winning shot twice this year against Missouri and then against Washington. That second game was on the road when that Washington crowd was fully energized in a big Washington comeback. I know it's not the same environment you'll see here, but I feel really good having that guy in my pocket. Where does Michigan State go? If this is a tie game with 2 minutes left, I don't know if Michigan State has that go-to guy late in the game when they need a bucket. Where do they go? That's one that I'm monitoring. And I actually, normally you go on the road and you say, well, you get down to the last possession game and you're almost always going to lean the home team. And I still think, that's not where you want to be, obviously, especially with Tom Izzo on the sideline drawing stuff up. But I feel really good in those late game situations with the guy I have with the ball in his hands on my team, and just how under control, and he's going to, he can score it, but he's also going to make the right play if it's there. And Michigan State's played in one last possession game all season. It was in Maui against North Carolina, and that was actually one where they kind of let it slip away. UNC hit a game tying 3 to send it to overtime, and then Michigan State took a pretty big lead in overtime and then ended up winning by 3. So it wasn't necessarily last possession, need a shot type of thing. And as we mentioned, Michigan State doesn't have that go-to guy offensively. So I actually feel kind of, even going to Breslin Center, okay. If this just comes down to the wire, I feel damn good knowing I have Kasperus Yakonas on my team and Michigan State doesn't have him. I feel like that's the case for a lot of teams, but I would expect this to come down to the wire. I mean, I don't think Illinois is going in there and handing Michigan State a blowout, and I certainly don't think Michigan State, especially given the competition they've played, is going to beat Illinois comfortably with Kasperus in there. So I think this one is going to come down to the final moments, and we'll see if this team, in the toughest environment they've played in all year against a really well-coached, good defensive team with a lot of options and a lot of depth that's going to be fresh, it can handle that and go in there and get a win, because this would be a huge win for Illinois. And like I said, I think you kind of have to have it if you truly want to win the Big Ten title, because I just think it'll be tough to make up for this one. Even though Michigan State does come to Champaign in February, it's just tough to be 3 games back in the loss column, 8 games into the conference season. That's one that's probably going to be tough to recover from unless Illinois goes on a 2020-21 Io Kofi team type of February run.
Yeah, it's just with the 18 teams, Michigan's undefeated, MSU's still undefeated. Those teams just keep winning. Purdue's ahead of us at 6-1. So I think I've said this, the Big Ten regular season title is not something I'm really expecting out of this team. It's not something I'm looking for. I'm hoping for the deep March run in terms of the actual NCAA tournament, which I'm starting to think might happen. I'm not going to get ahead of myself. But, I mean, yeah, you want to win Big Ten games, huge games on the road against really good teams. Illinois is going to do that a couple times this year. I would still expect maybe another USC-like game where they kind of just fall apart as a young team. But yeah, I don't know. This is a huge game. I'm with you. I think it is kind of must win because, yeah, you fall 3 games back, you get the return game in Champaign. But at that point, it's late in the season. I don't know. It's hard to come back from that for sure. And Michigan too. There's so many teams. It's really fun to watch. But Illinois kind of. The USC game hurt. The Northwestern game hurt too, but that's going to happen with a young team.
Yeah, ultimately it's just about, I want to be in the Big Ten race as long as possible because I think this Illinois team, in my opinion, is still the best team in the Big Ten, especially when they're at their best. But just talking about overall team, coach, roster fit, I get that they have 2 losses that are regrettable, but especially come the beginning of March, I really still do believe that this is the best team in the conference. So I'd love to be in the mix for the Big Ten title. And it's not the end of the world if that doesn't end up happening with this team, because ultimately, again, I think this team's March potential is through the roof. I think this team, you continue to get better and get Colin Boswell shooting better and just clean up some things and get more consistency and just fully establish your rotation. Kasperus keeps getting better. And maybe you get Will Riley going. Maybe. I'm not holding my breath on it anymore, but maybe you get him going and he starts to play well in February, March. I think this Illinois team is a national title contender at their best. But I think it just, for people that want to truly be in the mix and have that last week of the season mean something Big Ten-wise and compete for a Big Ten title, that's where I say you probably need this one, if that's a realistic goal for you. But ultimately, resume-wise, seed-wise, this loss does nothing. It's a game you're probably going to be an underdog in slightly. But I think Illinois certainly can win it, and let's transition it right into predictions, and I'll start and say I think Illinois wins this game on Sunday. I think Illinois is going to go to Michigan State and win this game. I do. I want to see it fully from Michigan State against a super quality opponent. I think Illinois has played really good basketball on the road since that Northwestern game. I get that this is going to be the toughest test on the road they've had pretty clearly, just since that Oregon environment was so dead the night after they got toasted in the Rose Bowl by Ohio State. But I trust the way this team is playing right now. They've handled the road really well. You've got the best player on the court in Kasperus, who is back, and I just think makes such a difference in this game. I think pick and pop stuff again, now that you've gotten Tommy going and kind of snapped out of the little funk he was in there for 3 or 4 games. I think if he hits a couple shots in this game, that's huge for Illinois, just given Michigan State's front court. I think will struggle to guard that, and they have struggled with bigs who can shoot. And I just think Illinois, with the positional size they have on this Michigan State team, and going in there, I trust Illinois to continue playing the way that they've played, and I'm not expecting them to go on a 28-6 run in this game. But if Illinois plays really, other than that USC game, the type of basketball they've played for the last month plus at Michigan State, I think they win this game. I think still in my mind, and just based on what I've seen with each team playing their best basketball, I still think this Illinois team's a better team than Michigan State. I'll gladly eat my words on that if Michigan State beats Illinois by 12 on Sunday. But I don't know. I wasn't a ton of deep analysis there for me. I just think it's just a gut feel to me. I think Illinois is going to be ready to go in this game. And I find it hard to believe that Illinois is going to have 3 losses in the Big Ten while other teams have 0 with this roster. So I think Illinois gets it done. I'll say 81-77 Illinois.
Okay. I'm with you. Yeah. The thing with the Big Ten is we've seen this, I've felt the past 4 or 5 years, minus the Sky Clark team, Illinois has been the best team in the Big Ten, and they've walked out of there with 1 Big Ten regular season title. So it's just sometimes the best team doesn't win. Sometimes Greg Gard-led teams are just really good at closing out games and winning by 2 for 16 out of the 20 games. But back to this game, I don't have a ton of analysis either. I'm kind of going with my heart. I'm feeling Illinois' first buzzer beater win, and I think since the Io win against Michigan. I think they win 73-72 and KJ legitimately hits a buzzer beater. That's kind of how I'm feeling. I'm in 6 days when we record, I'm going to look like the stupidest person ever, but I honestly think 73-72 Illinois, KJ with an Io buzzer beater. Illinois walks out of East Lansing with a W.
Boy, talk about just an all-time season if KJ adds a buzzer beater at East Lansing, and maybe that game is the difference come March and Illinois wins a share of the Big Ten title, and that shot was the reason that did it. Boy, that'd be something. But hey, if Illinois down 1, 15 seconds left, timeout, and Illinois ball for the win, I feel phenomenal having Kasperus taking the shot. It's not going to make all of them. There's going to be some times maybe he turns it over and gets over ambitious on a play, but talk about just guys in the country, single players so far based on what they've done, really nationally, like I said, who you want with the ball in their hands late in a close game to go hit a game-winning shot for you. Kasperus is very high on that list. I'd find it hard to believe there's a ton of guys who've hit 2 game-winning shots in the last minute of games already this year away from home. Nonetheless, he's just such a stud. He's the great advantage in every game. It's just, you play Purdue and Braden Smith in some teams, but I do think that there is a part of a matchup like this, where as good as Michigan State is, as deep as they are, and as well as they play together, when you've got the clear best player individually on the floor, that does a lot for a team. And I think Kasperus has proven time and time again he'll show up in big games on the road, doesn't faze him at all. That'd be awesome. I hope you're right on that. Anything else? Anything else here?
I don't know. Like, just talking about closers, Illinois had maybe the best closer in the country for like 5 seasons straight. Io, no question. He hit the amount of like not just game winners, but daggers and just huge shots that Io hit in 3 years was unbelievable. Followed that up with Trent Frazier. He hit that dagger at Michigan State, which is kind of probably why I said KJ's going to do it again. Trent Frazier did it a couple times. TSJ was just late in games. You give him the ball, he's getting to the free throw line. Probably that counts as being a closer. So Illinois is just, Brad Underwood has a knack for finding just dogs and closers in the transfer portal and in high school and overseas now.
Yeah, I mean, and you talk about, looking ahead to March, and that's a really important thing to have, is one guy put the ball in his hands and he can close a game or win a game for you. Usually the teams that win it all have that guy, or teams that go to the Final Four have that guy. So feel pretty dang good having Kasperus Yakonas, and I'm very glad that it seems like it was truly a minor injury for him, and he looked totally normal on Tuesday and said after the game that he was tired of not playing and said, I'm playing, and he's back now. So I'm glad that we don't have to have that lingering over this game, and we know that he'll be out there. I'm excited about this one. Hope everybody enjoys the game. We will be back sometime after it early next week to break it down, so make sure you tune into that. Until then, give us a follow on Twitter at Champagne on Ice. Subscribe to the Field of 68 Podcast Network YouTube channel, and find us wherever else you get your podcasts, and we will talk some Illinois-Michigan State next week, and hope everybody enjoys the game, and let's hope for a big-time road win for this Illini team to get themselves right back firmly in the mix in the Big Ten. We will talk to you next time right here on